Hello, everyone. Welcome to this workshop. My name is Katya Prasilov, and I'm in charge of B2B marketing and communications for Reforest'Action, and I will be the moderator for this workshop today. We are very happy to be here today at the ChangeNOW Summit to talk to you about forests and their impact on climate change. So during this workshop, we're going to try to answer the following questions. First of all, are forests a genuine solution to climate change? How much can they help us limit climate change by preserving and by developing carbon sinks? And also why and how companies can include forest preservation and restoration projects into their climate strategies. So we are together for the next 45 minutes, and we will have a Q&A session at the end of the workshop. So please feel free to write down your questions as we go along. You have a discussion and question box on the right part of your screen, and you can write your questions there, and we will take them at the end of the session. So at this point, I would like to introduce our speakers for this session. First of all, we will have Jian Genoun. Jian is an international project manager at Reforest'Action. Her missions include developing and monitoring forestry projects dedicated to generate carbon credits in tropical regions of the world. Then we will hear from Carole Renner, who also works for Reforest'Action as project manager for our Labelback Urban forestry projects. These are projects taking place in France, which have obtained this label created by the French Ministry of Ecological Transition. Carole will tell you more about this later on. So before I let Jian and Carole give you more details, I would like to start by giving you a few explanation about who we are at Reforest'Action and what we do. Reforest'Action is a company which was created 11 years ago. We are a certified B Corporation. Our main mission is to provide a concrete and sustainable response to two major threats. One being the climate emergency, and the second one being the big biodiversity loss happening all around the world. We are also taking into account in our mission local, social, and economic issues because we believe that they are key in order to have successful forestry projects. We work with what we call a crowd planting model. Jian, if you could please show us the next slide. Thank you. What's a crowd planting model? It's a model that allows everyone to participate. Anyone can support our forestry project, from citizens willing to plant 1 or 2 or 3 trees to big companies willing to plant thousands or millions of trees. And this is what allows us to support forestry projects and help forests on a large scale and around the world. So in order to do this, what we do is that we collect funds, private funds from companies and from citizens. And then on the other hand, we select forestry projects, quality projects based on a certain number of criteria. We work for this with several local project holders. They can be private owners, public owners, communities, or NGOs. And we support these projects financially. We also monitor these projects over time to make sure that the trees are planted and are growing well. So far, we have planted 12 million trees around the world. You can see on this map that we have projects in many, many different countries, actually 35 countries so far. And we have local partners, various types of local partners who are the ones who are actually planting the trees on the ground while we'll help them by monitoring the projects. Now, I would also like, now that you know more or less what Reforest'Action operates, I would like to start by giving you a quick introduction about the subject of forests and climate, and by explaining a few basic principles They might be only a reminder to some of you, but I believe they are important. So when we talk about acting for climate, basically what we need to do overall is we need to reach global carbon neutrality. What is carbon neutrality? It's a balance. It's been defined scientifically at global level, so on a planetary scale, as a balance between two things. On the one hand, so on the left part, you see the CO2 emissions from human activities. So it comes from burning fossil fuel, deforestation, etc. And then on the other hand, you have the CO2 emissions, the CO2, sorry, which is removed from the atmosphere and absorbed and stored in the form of carbon on the long term by what we call carbon sinks. So these carbon sinks can be developed in several ways with reforestation projects, with the specific farming practices. For example, you also have technological solutions, even though they're not quite ready to be developed on a large scale, not yet at least. So in order to reach this balance, which is key to solve the climate crisis, we need to make sure that we don't emit more CO2 than the carbon sinks can absorb at global level. So forests are the largest land-based carbon sinks. The largest carbon sink overall on the planet is the oceans, but on land, it's really forests that constitutes the largest carbon sink. Forests and trees absorb more or less 2 billion tons of CO2, metric tons of CO2 every year. So this figure is according to the FAO. So now that we see the amount that it can absorb and store, what we see is there are two very important things that need to be done for forests. First of all, we need to preserve the existing forest, the existing carbon sinks that they represent. And also, in order to do that, we need to avoid deforestation and forest degradation, because these are the two things that can affect these carbon sinks. And the second thing that we need to do in order to reach global carbon neutrality is to develop these carbon sinks by developing existing forests or by planting new forests. And of course, this only makes sense if we reduce our emissions, our greenhouse gas emissions overall globally. It makes no sense to plant trees and to preserve forests if, on the other hand, organization, companies, citizens, if we don't all act to really reduce drastically our greenhouse gas emissions, because this is really the key point to solve the climate crisis. So now that I've given you a little bit of an introduction and basic principles, I will let Gian talk to you more in details about the role of forests in the race to mitigate climate change.
Thank you very much, Katia. Hello, everyone. Pleased to be here. So yes, after this introduction, I will try to answer the question, what role do forest solutions, or more widely nature-based solutions, have in this race to mitigate climate change and stop further global temperature increases? I will start by saying that forests are a stabilizing factor for the climate, and their role in the climate change, it is twofold, because they act both as a solution and a cause for greenhouse gas emissions. And there is an urgent need to tackle both aspects if we want forest solutions to provide a sound answer to the climate change crisis. So on the left side, you can read that forests are a cause of emissions. It is estimated that around 25% of global emissions come from the land sector, which is the second largest source of greenhouse gas emissions after the energy sector. And half of these, which is between 5 and 10 gigatons of carbon equivalent each year, come from deforestation and forest degradation. And at the same time, forests can significantly contribute to addressing the effects of climate change. As Katja mentioned before, it's first because they have the ability to remove carbon from the atmosphere. So over 2 billion tons of carbon dioxide, which is about 1/3 of the CO2 released from burning fossil fuels, is absorbed by forests every year. Increasing and maintaining forests is therefore really an essential solution to mitigate the effects of climate change. And beyond this ability to store carbon, besides this, forests and nature-based solutions in general can have a powerful role in reducing temperatures in the long term. Actually, a group of Oxford scientists have published an article in Nature this month showing that land use changes will continue to act long past the point at which net zero emissions are achieved, if they are achieved, and the global temperature peak. And they will have an important role in the planetary cooling in the second half of the century. In other words, this means that nature-based solutions, which forest solutions are part of, will cool the planet long after the peak temperature is reached. And the model of this Oxford scientist showed and came to the conclusion that an ambitious scaling up of nature-based solution needs to be implemented fast and thoroughly now, but not at the expense of other measures. And that's what Katja was mentioning before. There will be no no effective climate mitigation if we do not tackle emissions first and go and engage in decarbonation. So combining both of these aspects, which are the cause and the solution, it is estimated that halting the loss and degradation of forest ecosystem and promoting their restoration could have the potential to contribute to over 1/3 of the total climate mitigation that scientists say is required by 2030 to meet the objectives of the Paris Agreement. So this is just to give you an overview of the problem and of how forests can help tackle this problem.
Thank you very much, Jeanne. So we understand that forests are very important for the climate on many different levels. Can you maybe tell us a bit more about the limits of what forests can do for the climate?
Yes, of course. It's very important to emphasize also on the limits. And I will here emphasize on only 2 caveats, but there are more. These are the principal caveats. The first one is the inability of forests to provide a single solution to climate change. Let this be very clear for all of us. There will be no climate mitigation, no effective climate mitigation, if the current levels of emissions from all sectors are not significantly reduced. So forests alone won't do much, and even more so with the rising of global temperatures, because the rising of global temperatures hamper the ability of forests to sequester carbon. The second one is that forest solutions are complex solutions. As stated by Dr. Girardin from Oxford in the article I was mentioning, singular focus on rapid carbon sequestration as the only metric of success of forest climate mitigation can result in perverse outcomes. A case in point for this would be one of the first projects to have been funded in the context of climate mitigation in Cambodia. They actually financed a project that led an area of more than 34,000 hectares of intact forest ecosystem to become a lodging concession, with much of it replaced by an acacia monoculture. And this seemed to have carbon benefits and seemed to be an interesting project for carbon, but obviously resulted in ecological devastation and affected negatively more than 1,900 families.
So, okay, so we understand that there are some pros and cons when we talk about the powers of forests on the climate. So what do you think we can conclude?
I would say, as many specialists say, that forests are not a single nor a simple solution to climate change. We could say that they should adhere to the high-level principles that apply to all nature-based solutions. That is to say, First, remember that they are not an alternative to decarbonation, so they have to be implemented and designed at the same time as the levels of emission have to be reduced. Second point is that forest solution projects have to be designed in partnership with local communities while respecting indigenous and other rights. And this is a really important point, because when you pursue only carbon, as I said before, and you don't look at other major aspects of projects such as social, environmental, on other sides like biodiversity and economic, you end up with projects that are not a good answer for a sustainable development as a multidimensional team. And the third important takeout is that forest projects must support biodiversity from the level of the gene to the ecosystem, and nature-based solutions in general have to support biodiversity in order to be effective. So instead of measuring success of this project by looking only at carbon dynamics, metrics of success should include those of biodiversity across multiple trophic levels, socioeconomic factors such as populations empowerment, employment, food production. So yes, this would be a global conclusion.
Okay, thank you very much, Jan, for all these details. Now, maybe you could give us some concrete examples and tell us more about what forestry projects Reforest'Action is putting in place in order to preserve and develop forests.
Yes, of course. Thanks, Katja. So at Reforest'Action, we try to adhere to the principles that I was mentioning as much as we can. And as you explained in the introduction, we support and develop both projects that avoid emission by protecting endangered forests in areas where anthropic pressure is very high. And on the other side, we develop and support projects of forest restoration, for example, through reforestation, agroforestry, assisted natural regeneration, etc. So to give you a clearer image of what these can be, I will briefly describe two projects that we're currently developing or supporting in tropical forest landscapes, which is my area of expertise. So the first one is the Jare Power project. It's a very good example of a forest conservation project in an area with high anthropic pressure. It is developed in the state of Pará, which is in northern Brazil, by our local partner, Biophilica, in a partnership with the Jare Foundation and the Jare Cellulose. It aims to protect 920,000 hectares of native forests in a municipality where unclear land tenure laws, widespread land speculation, overall weak law enforcement, and cattle ranching are as many drivers of deforestation. So throughout the lifespan of the project, which is 40 years, it is estimated that 50,480 hectares of forest will be saved from destruction, thanks to the activities implemented, and this will protect 340 species of flora and over 2,000 species of fauna, of which 133 are endangered. This is just to give a focus on the biodiversity side of the project and how it is important to protect forests and the impact that can be observed on the biodiversity. And I saw on the question someone asking if the projects are certified. So this is an example of a project that has the VCS standard, which is the Verified Carbon Standard, the Voluntary Carbon Standard. And it also comes with the CCB standard, which is a standard that looks at all the co-benefits of the project, so community, climate, and biodiversity co-benefits. And the second example of the type of projects that we develop and support at Reforest'Action is the Rio Madeira project. So it's a forest restoration project. It is in the same country, Brazil, but in the southwestern part of the Amazon, in a state called Rondônia. So it is a large-scale reforestation project that we are currently designing. We have not started implementing it yet, but we're designing it with an NGO, local NGO called Rio Terra. And also we're working with the local government because we're aiming at restoring about 20,000 hectares of public lands that were illegally deforested over 1 or 2 decades ago, depending on the area. So we will be planting a large diversity of native species. The aim is to plant more than 40 native species, some of which are endangered. And we also plan to produce fruits that will be sustainably harvested for local consumption, and also to develop local economies proceeding from the project. For example, we'll be planting Brazilian nuts, cocoa, acai. So yes, that's the type of project that we have currently at Reforest'Action, and a very important, a very important bottleneck of all of these projects at Reforest'Action, but in the sector in general, is financing. One of the conclusions of the article I was mentioning earlier, the Nature's article, is that there is an urgent need to increase investment in high-quality nature-based solutions, part of which are forest conservation projects, because they currently receive a small proportion of existing climate mitigation financing, which does not reflect their potential. And carbon offsets can be a very effective tool to direct investments towards these projects. And they are increasingly relied on, carbon offsets. But in the voluntary market, you can find carbon offsets of variable quality. So an important thing to keep in mind is that it is better to look for projects that have recognized certification, such as the VCS certification, the CCB certification for co-benefits, or the gold standard that covers both carbon and co-benefits. I guess that's the end of my presentation, and that makes a transition to the presentation of my colleague Carole, who will talk to you about another tool. It's not carbon offsets, but it's a French tool that also allows to direct financing towards reforestation and land use projects in France.
Thank you, Jeanne. So I'm going to talk about one particular tool, the Labelback Urban, which is our national carbon market. So the Labelback Urban was created in 2019 by the Ministry of Ecological Transition and I4C. Jeanne, you can skip the slide, please. I4C is the Institute for Climate Economics, a French think tank analyzing economic issues related to climate and energy policies. Its aim is to help the national actors whose projects contribute to fighting climate change by valorizing the quantity of greenhouse gases stocked or reduced thanks to those projects. Those GHG quantities are sold to organizations willing to voluntarily offset their residual emissions. So how does it work? The methodologies that exist in the Labelback Urban for the moment are for agricultural and forestry projects, but at Reforest'Action, we mainly focus on the forestry projects. Those, like international methodologies like VCS or gold standard, compare the project scenario, which is often the planting of trees, to a reference scenario, for example, shrub encroachment. Several compartments are taken into account. The first compartment is consists of the direct impact, which includes the storage in the forest biomass, litter, and soil, and the degressive sequestration in the wood products collected from the forest. The second compartment is an indirect impact, which consists of the substitution of less sustainable materials and energies by the wood products collected from the forest. So those represent the total of the most representative compartments of the forest, even if there is also other impacts, but those cannot be really quantified so precisely. So the Labelback Urban also valorizes co-benefits of the project. The forestry project doesn't only impact climate change, they also provide different co-benefits that are valorized by the Labelback Urban. The socio-economical benefits include, for example, the choice of a local enterprise to realize the plantation works, or the FSC or PEFC certification of the forest, which are sustainable management certification for forestry. The benefits for biodiversity include the diversity of species planted and the creation or preservation of wooded edges that are not only good for the biodiversity, but also to protect the forest from climate problems like big winds or things like that. The benefits for the soil depends on the respect of the soil during the plantation's preparation work. And the benefits for water can be, for example, the planting of a forest in a source water protection area. So for the organization, the Labelback Urban has several added values for the organization willing to compensate their residual emissions. And here are some of them. First of all, the projects are close to the organization's activities and clients. All of them are in France, and if needed, some can be found in more specific regions. Secondly, it officially contributes to the National Low Carbon Strategy, published in 2015 and carried out by the Ministry of Ecological Transition. Finally, Reforest'Action can find or create projects with special features fitting the organization's strategy. For example, we can have projects planting a certain type of tree or shrub, or supporting a specific animal or group of species, for example, the birds, if it is interesting for the organization's strategy.
Thank you very much, Carol, for all these details. Can you maybe give us a bit more details now about some concrete examples of projects with this Labelback Urban in France?
Of course. So here are two of our labeled projects located in Normandy. Massif de la Forestière is an afforestation on a 4-hectare depleted agricultural land. Species planted include classical production species like oak and fruit trees like wild cherry that supports the biodiversity and provides them a lot of precious resources. This project stores on the 30 year of the crediting period 885 tons of CO2 equivalent. L'Épinjosse is a reconstitution of a 10-hectare forest destructed by bark beetles, an insect that causes heavy damages among French forests. Species planted in this project are resistant to this insect and will thus create a perennial stand and give long-term resources for the local biodiversity. This project stores, on the 30 years of the crediting period, 2,850 tons of CO2 equivalent. And more projects are labeled at Reforest'Action or in the process of being labeled. And you can contact me if you want more details, or you can also look at it on our website. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol, for all these details. Before we go to Q&A session, if you have some questions, don't hesitate to write them in the box located on the right side of your screen. I would like maybe as a wrap-up, try to summarize the key ideas that we developed during this presentation. The first one is that forests are definitely part of the solution to solve the climate crisis. Even though they are not a miracle solution, they certainly constitute a major carbon sinks that we need to protect, first of all, and also to develop if we want to reach global carbon neutrality. This can only be done, and it only makes sense if in the meantime we all reduce drastically our greenhouse gas emissions. If we only plant forests and trees, this won't solve the climate crisis. Also, I think both Gian and Carol have underlined the importance of developing good forestry projects, meaning projects that follow some key principles, planting the right trees, a diversity of trees in the right place at the right time, trees adapted to the local context, and also to work together with local stakeholders, especially local populations that need to be included in these projects if we want to make them a success. And in order to support the development of forestry projects, the financial support from companies is key. Offsetting their remaining emissions meaning the ones left once they have reduced most of their emissions, is really important. They can support forestry projects. This should definitely be part of their climate strategies. The important part also is that they make sure that they support quality forestry projects and look at the carbon part of the project, but also at all the other benefits included in this project, including biodiversity, local population, etc. So I hope this was helpful and informative for you all. We now have some time to answer some questions. I've seen a few in the question box. So there was one question about the certification. Are your projects certified like gold standard concerning CO2 offsetting? And also, are you able to deliver CO2 neutral label to your clients? Maybe I will let Jeanne answer the first part of that question. And if that's all right with you, Jeanne, I'll answer the second part.
My mic wasn't activated. So we're talking about the question that was asked by Marcel Debert, that's right?
No, it's Thibaut Auvergne, actually. Oh. Are your projects certified like gold standard concerning CO2 offsetting?
Yes.
I think you mentioned it in your presentation, but yes, just to clarify things.
Of course. So yes, thanks for your questions. It depends on the type of projects you're mentioning. The project that we have on our website that are displayed are mainly restoration projects with no carbon valuation. We do not sell carbon credits on them, and thus they do not pursue any certification like gold standard or VCS, which are carbon certifications. But though our work is supervised or audited by EcoCert, so EcoCert does the work of evaluating the projects or monitoring, in the sense that they check if the claims that we do on the project are true or not. For the carbon projects, these which we display on our website or on our presentation with quantification of carbon emission reductions or carbon sequestrations, these all pursue certification. Currently in our portfolio, they are all VCS certified, so verified carbon standard, and most of them also have the CCB certification, which is for the co-benefits.
Thank you, Jeanne. Regarding the second part of that question, which is, are you able to deliver the CO2 neutral label to your client? We do not deliver any label to our clients. This is not part of our mission. Our mission is more focused on the forestry projects, so selecting the right projects, and regarding carbon projects, making sure they have a label that certifies that the ton of CO2 that is offset is real and is certified with a label like gold standard, for example. One thing that's very important is, in your question, is the CO2 neutral label for clients. Clients, I assume you mean companies. Just to be clear, the carbon neutrality has only been defined scientifically at global level, so at planetary level. It hasn't been defined scientifically at company level, organization level, sorry. And also, more importantly, it doesn't really make sense to have a company or product or a region which would be carbon neutral, because carbon neutrality only makes sense at global level. I don't have that much time to develop this subject here, But if you go to our website, reforestaction.com, you will find more details about why we believe carbon neutrality only makes sense at global level. There is a question at the beginning from Marcel Deberg, which is it's more information than a question as far as I understand it, asking about if we know about green spine cooling role of nature. I think Marcel is giving some links in the discussion panel that you can all look at if you want more information regarding the solution that he's referring to. There's another question about cities. According to you, how important is reforestation within cities? Do you also focus on these projects or plan in the future? Yes, we do support forestry projects in cities. Do you want, Carole or Jeanne, do you want to give more details about this?
Maybe I can give some details, even if I don't specifically work on the cities forest that we create. But yes, the forest in cities is very important for several reasons. First of all, it cools the city down, so it's really important to for the comfort of the inhabitants and to have this buffer effect in the cities. Also, it of course stores carbon and make some space for the biodiversity. And the important thing is to have a network of forest in cities and outside the city to make the exchange of biodiversity possible and not just make a prison for them. So we really have to think that in total and as an intelligent réseau, je sais plus le mot. Network, thank you. So it's really, really important. But of course, it doesn't have the same, it cannot store as much carbon as we can do outside the city, because outside the city we can create very large projects of forests. So both are really important for us, and we work on both of them.
Thank you, Carole. If you want more information about what we do in cities, you can look at our website, or you can contact through the networking options on ChangeNOW Summit website. You can contact one of us, or go to we have a Reforest'Action digital booth, and we will give you more information on that. We have a question also about job opportunities for students in this field. There are definitely job opportunities. We have some job opportunities currently at Reforest'Action that you can find on our website. What kind of background or education do they need? I have many students who are in the business. They're very interested in the environment. This would be a fantastic opportunity for them. It is a fantastic opportunity. Maybe Jeanne or Carole, you could give information about the background or education that you think is necessary to work on forestry projects.
Okay. I'll start, and Carole, if you want to add something, then I'll let you. I would say that for example, inside Reforest'Action, we have people from very different backgrounds. We have people that come from business schools, people who studied ecology, people who are agricultural engineers. So many type of different backgrounds can find a good place in this sector. Then it depends, of course, on the type of jobs that you want to do. So this is a global answer. There is no specific background that is required. Every background can find a good fit.
Yes, because for example, at Reforest'Action, we have people working on forestry projects. We also have people working on communications, marketing, sales, etc. So there are many ways to work on a forestry project directly or more indirectly.
Yes, I agree with you. I think there's no specific background. It is you can study forestry, or you can also study something else. For example, I studied biodiversity protection, so you can like have very different backgrounds, and it will be relevant for us for sure.
Okay, thank you. We have one question regarding, so I think it will be our last question because our time is almost up. Regarding Labelback Urban projects, my understanding is that there are currently no projects that commit to keep the trees standing for more than 30 years, 30 years minimum period, after which trees are typically harvested. How does that impact, in your view, the project impact, carbon, biodiversity, etc.? And do you think it will evolve in the short term? Carole? You.
Yes. Okay, so 30 years is the crediting period. It is not the exploitation period. So after 30 years, there's no interest at all at cutting those trees. We are planting trees that have an exploitation age way over 30 years. So for example, for oaks, it's even more than 100-year-old. So if there is no accident, like, I don't know, a fire or something, the trees will stand up for way more than 30 years for sure, because for the owner, there is no interest at all at cutting them at this young age, because they won't have reached an age that gives them enough value for the investment, for the departure investment that they made. And also it would be at risk to create another stand, because the most of the mortality is in the beginning of the plantation. So it is I don't think we will ever see one of our projects cut at this young age. But of course, the crediting period is 30 years because it is a standard even in the international projects. So how does that impact, in your view, the project impact? There is in each label, but the Labelback Urban has I don't know how to put that. The total stockage capacity of the forest is lowered by 10% or more, depending on the project, to represent the risk of fire, of disease, or anything that could kill the trees and affect the carbon storage. So that is taken into account, so that in the total pool of projects, it is buffered, not to have sold more carbon storage than there is eventually during the project life. I don't know if that's clear, but I'm trying to.
I think that was clear.
Okay,
Thank you very much, Carole. So this is the end of this workshop. I would like to thank Gian and Carole for participating and giving us so much interesting information about forests and climate. Thank you very much to all the participants who attended this workshop. If you want to view it again, or if you want to share it, please keep in mind that it will be online in a few hours, and it will stay online for a few months, so you can share it around you if you found it interesting. And please don't hesitate to contact us. We have an online booth on the ChangeNOW Summit at Reforest'Action, or you can contact either Gian, Carole, or myself through the networking facility if you want more details. Thank you very much and have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.